what to say. They have the knowledge, but they're not sure what to share and how to express themselves. So the impromptu speaking course addresses those issues. So that's me as a lad. You can note the funny facial expression and the silly hairstyle. Does it remind you of this guy? You can probably see some resemblance there. And even though we've both gotten a lot older, we still like to hang out together, me and my Uncle Al. So today, High Impact Manager. This is a course that is not based on typical textbook management. A lot of you may have taken a business course when you were in school, and you might have learned some of the management basics. It changes over the years, and my approach is what is relevant for today, because we're going through a lot of changes. The fact that we're not meeting face-to-face right now is a big change. So what do the best managers do differently from the rest? That's essentially what this course is about. We do talk a little bit about hard skills like giving feedback and delegating and managing your time, but those aren't that exciting, so we don't spend a lot of time on it. It's mostly about what are the qualities and behaviors of the most effective leaders and managers. So without any more delay, you will have a chance to get some Q&A towards the end, so don't be shy. And there should be about an hour and 15 minutes, give or take. See how it goes. Interesting statistic. This was a study done in Singapore a couple of years ago. And they found that only 22% of Singaporeans believe that their employers are effective. What effective means, I'm not exactly sure. There are ways to define it, but I think we get the gist of it. Competent, capable, they do the job they're supposed to do, they're productive, things like that. 22%. What do you think about that number? Is that good? I think it's lousy. 22%. What it means is, if you do the math, 78% of Singaporeans think their employers are not effective. And what's the point of working if you're not going to be good at it, if you're not going to do it well? There's been other research aside from that. This was a poll that a company I worked with some years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, they did a study, and they asked all of the reports, all of the workers, employees, not the senior managers. And they also asked a series of questions to the managers to try to figure out, do they see things the way their people see things? So when they asked the managers, what do you think your employees will say about you? Do they think you're an effective listener? 63% said yes. Do you think they think you care? 65%, getting a little better. Do your bosses model the company's values? Do they walk the talk? 67%. All right, what do you think about these numbers? Let's focus on the middle one. I think that's the most useful for our purposes. 65% say, yeah, I think the people who work for me know that I care about them. That also is a tragic figure, because if you flip it around, it means 35%, 1/3 of all managers know their employees don't think the manager cares about them. And to be able to admit that in a survey, that's not really good, okay? So these are bad enough, but then let's look at what the employees said when they were asked the questions. And for the employees, we see it's very different. In fact, going back to that second point, only 12% of employees think that their boss cares about them as a person. 65% of the bosses thought so, 12% of the people said yes. That is a huge gap. And in business, a gap is a problem. When what you expect is over here, you're expecting something really good, and what you get is down here, that gap is the measure of dissatisfaction or disappointment. So as a customer, if you go to, say, a restaurant, they're opening up tomorrow. If you go to a restaurant and you're expecting the meal and the service to be up here, and what you find is down here, you're going to be very unhappy with that dining experience. And that's a problem for the restaurant, for the business. So whenever you have a big discrepancy, it means you've got a lot of work to do. So this is what people in Singapore, for one big company, felt. Now you may think, well, maybe that's just a strange case. But there are other, let me get this slide going. Here's another study. This is by Gallup, and this is a global study. And what they found, and this is a similar type of study, that 68% of all workers consider themselves not engaged. You know, they're not really feeling like a part of the team, that they're making a difference, that they really love what they're doing, working with that company. And another 17% are actively disengaged, meaning they hate it so much, they will even sabotage the company and just don't even care about doing the minimum. And this is not cumulative, these are separate. So 85% of all workers globally are thought to be either not engaged or actively disengaged. So that's a huge problem. And something needs to be done. A lot of it is not the workers, but the managers. In fact, there are a number of business gurus out there, a lot of gurus of all kinds. Most of them are not really gurus. But in business, the guru of all gurus is Peter Drucker. And he said the responsibility of work is not the workers, but the managers. So as a manager, you're responsible for the happiness, the engagement, the output, the productivity of all of your employees, everybody who works for you. If they're having a problem, it's not their fault. Now, as an employee, that might be reassuring, but not all bosses think that way. But the enlightened ones realize that they're responsible. If the employees are not doing a good job, you've got to ask why. Maybe I didn't hire the right person. Maybe I didn't make my expectations clear. I didn't train them well enough. I don't motivate them. I don't give them the support they need. Because people don't want to waste their time at work every day. They want to contribute. They want it to be fulfilling and rewarding. They want to enjoy it. So if there's a problem, the managers need to step up and take responsibility. And that might be a little hard for a lot of people to grasp. Okay, so let me ask you guys, what do you think are some of the characteristics of a great leader, the ideal boss? Who would you love to work for, and what qualities would you like them to possess? Yeah. So if you guys can just use the chat here, and I'll get a whiteboard up, and then we can write down some of these ideas. Okay, empathy. Thank you, CT. Anybody else brave enough to venture a guess? Inspiring. And a lot of the ones that we really admire, like Steve Jobs, very inspiring. I would imagine Elon Musk is also inspiring. Ability to communicate, that's a very common one. In fact, most surveys show that communication skills is the #1 quality that people need in a boss but don't get. That's one of the big problems. So Young Sim, a couple goals, clear goals, and recognition. Recognition and appreciation are huge. A clear mission or vision. And a lot of leaders don't have a clear vision, and if they do, they don't communicate it clearly, which means it's almost not there. Nurturing or caring, and that's probably the biggest thing that they can do better, and we can talk about how to do that. So trust. Yeah, you have to trust your leaders. Willing to lead. I guess we'll just put that as is. And walk the talk, which to me is like authentic. Okay, so trained. I'm not sure what that means, but let's just put competence. Somebody who knows what they're doing and is effective. Growth, and that could be personal or it could be for the company. But as we'll see, helping people grow as individuals is huge. It's probably the biggest thing that a great leader can do. Someone who's consistent. Predictability is important in business. You need to know what the environment is, what to expect from the laws, from the economy to the extent possible, but also from the people you work with. So consistency, predictability, somebody who's even-handed and fair, not capricious or whimsical with a different reaction every day. So lead by example. We could say that, walk the talk. Support. Okay, support is also huge. Not only supporting you in your work, but in your development, in your career development. You have some leaders with a very kind of a selfish mindset where they don't want people to outshine them, or they want people to be controlled. Whereas somebody like a Steve Jobs probably is happy to see you move on to a better opportunity. You know, if I can't give you what you need, then I want the best for you, move on. And my job is to be so good at this that people don't want to go, that they can grow with me. And when they do go, we're still friends, but that's okay. I've got a lot of other people waiting in the wings who I've also been developing. A company needs depth, just like a sports team. If a player is injured, you need somebody to step in. If somebody gets traded or leaves, you need somebody to step in. So supporting individual growth, even training. Why do companies send you for training? And some don't, especially some of the smaller companies. They're afraid if I invest in my people and then they get really good, they're going to go someplace better. All right, I'm going to invest that money in them and they're going to leave me and I'm not going to get anything out of it. But the better companies don't really mind that because they know they've got plenty of other people who want to come on board. And then we've got respect. Okay, that's also very big. Now, some of these you're not really sure. I mean, but when you see it, you know it. In other words, it's hard to define respect or support maybe, but you can feel it when it's there and when it isn't there. All right. So advisor, problem solver, collaborator, that's a lot over there. Let me see if I can capture that. Okay. Oh, looks like we've got a philosopher here. Hun Tio. Use things and love people, and not use people and love things. I like that. I might have to steal that one day. Okay, so we've got pretty much the usual suspects here. Let me see if there's anything strangely missing. Yeah, pretty much there. All right, I like that Branson quote. Train people well enough so that they can leave, presumably for something better, but treat them well enough so they don't want to. All right, so some of the best companies in the world to work for are, we call them the FANG, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, the big tech companies. And they treat people really well. I've got one of my wife's cousins works for Google in China, but he's Singaporean, and so when he's in town, he can go to the Google office in Singapore, and they have a hot desk, and he can work there, and he can eat, and of course they have chefs and all sorts of fabulous food. He can bring his parents to the office for lunch, and Google doesn't think, hey, you know what, they don't work here. This is costing us money. How do we justify spending all of this money on having all these snacks and great food and entertainment for our people? In the old days, it would be hard to justify that to the shareholders. They would say, this is a waste of money. We could be more profitable if we weren't splurging on all these luxuries. But what does it do for Google? It gets them the best people in the world. And all of the top graduates from MIT or Stanford or whoever, they want to work at Google or Apple or one of these other top companies. And if they get a job there and they're getting all of this benefit, they're not going to leave. In fact, a lot of them work there very late into the night. And so, yeah, they're going to eat dinner and the company will pay for it. But they're going to be around, they're contributing, they're happy, and they're the best of the best. And so all of these companies we mentioned, they're all growing fast. They're all extremely profitable. They all do great work. They're the leaders in their field. So this old mindset of not wanting to spend money, not investing in people, being very suspicious of what people will do, afraid of not getting your investment back. We see that in the modern world. That doesn't really hold up anymore. So if you want to take a screenshot of this list, I'll give you a minute or a few seconds to do that. And then we'll move on to some other slides. Okay. Don't know where my slides went. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm not going to give you a lot of statistics. but it's just a good way to start out, give you a little bit of a feel for what the environment is like. This is another study, global, it was published in Harvard Business Review not too long ago. And they tried to distill a bunch of qualities, 74 different qualities, and they tried to group them into categories. And this is the result they get. The highest 67%, high ethical and moral standards. Okay. But a lot of the things we talked about are also scoring very high. You know, these are the top 10, and they've grouped those into 5 different groups. So we see the goals and objectives, but notice the loose guidelines. They're not micromanaging. They're not telling you exactly how to do it step by step. They're letting people figure it out for themselves. Because sometimes, even though you're the boss, somebody who's closer to the action, closer to the front line, has a better understanding, and they can come up with a better approach than you can. So let them run with it, trust them to do a great job. Communication of expectations in particular, so people know where they stand, what the expectations are. Flexibility, that was one we missed. Committed to training and development, communicating often and openly, not necessarily in terms of expectations or knowledge, expertise, but just being approachable, getting to know people, treating them as individuals. Open to new ideas, collaboration, we're all in this together. Again, developing into next generation leader, personal development, and trial and error, letting people make a mistake without fear of the consequences. And this is the last one. This was also from that Gallup study. No, this was McKinsey, sorry about that. Supportive is number 1. You probably didn't expect that. Okay, so a little bit of background on management. I said it's not a management course, so we don't do a lot, but it's still worth an overview. Typically, throughout most of history, armies and governments and companies and other large organizations were organized in a very top-down structure. So you had the boss up there, and then you had different layers all the way down to the worker bees at the bottom. And the boss was clearly the boss. And even in the middle levels, hierarchy was very important. And you knew your place. And you didn't try to speak out of turn or step out of line. It was based on authority. Over the last 50, 60 years, we've seen a flattening, a compression of that hierarchy or pyramid. So there aren't so many levels now. In a lot of organizations, there's not a lot of distance between the senior people and some of the workers. And even in some of the teams, we've got participative management, where the boss will consult with people and include them in the decision-making process. We've got self-directed or self-leading teams, a team without a boss, and yet the team functions. I like to use the analogy of an orchestra. If you think about an orchestra, you've got scores of different people playing instruments. You've got a bunch of people playing the violin, a few people on the flute, the tuba, the bass, the various strings and wind and percussion instruments. And you've got one conductor. And this conductor they stand there and they have their little baton and they wave it and everybody plays. What is this guy really doing? Is he necessary? I say he, it could be a she, but most of them are he's. Is this guy really necessary? Can you have an orchestra without a conductor? And the answer is yes. You have some orchestras that have no conductor and they play just as beautifully and just as perfectly as the orchestra with the conductor. So what does the conductor do? He doesn't need to be there. I think the answer would probably be he has an interpretation of how the music should be played. So when Beethoven wrote a symphony, he's not around today to tell us how it's supposed to be played. So some conductors might want more of the brass and the winds, and others might want a faster tempo. All right. And this is sort of like the vision of a leader. A leader has a certain idea about the future he wants to see or she wants to see, a certain destination they have in mind, a certain outcome, but they're not, strictly speaking, necessary. In fact, there are some companies now that are basically, they call it the amoeba structure. They've got hundreds or even thousands of different project teams that are always changing shape like an amoeba, and some only have 3, 4, 5 people on them. And there are no leaders. They've got a brief, they've got a goal, they know what they have to do, but they're left to their own devices to do it. I'm wondering if we're going to see much of that in Singapore anytime soon. And I'm thinking probably no, although who knows what the future holds. And I like to think a lot of you guys are that future. So in a nutshell, management started out very hierarchical, authoritative, where the boss was the boss. And over the years, the boss has come down to be more equal with the other people. And now we even have this thing, you may have heard of it, called servant leadership. Have you heard of servant leadership? Where you lead by serving others, by giving them the tools, the resources, the training, the opportunity to add value and create and conduct business. And your job is just to make sure that they have everything, like almost a clerk, where the leader is now a servant. That may be a little extreme for a lot of us. But the big picture is the organization is a lot more evenly based, a lot of collaboration. In fact, here's some factors that are shaping this change. Disruption is everywhere. And I just put this COVID-19 thing in there yesterday, because when I designed the course a few years ago, I'm always revising it though, we had the big 5. Artificial intelligence is affecting the workplace. The Internet of Things, where everything is connected. And you can go to your phone and set the temperature for the water in your bath, and you come home and the bath is ready. Blockchain, not so much for the Bitcoin as just the way of using data. The sharing economy, where you don't need a car anymore. If you need one, you call one and just use it as you go. You don't have to have this big investment in something. In fact, data centers now are doing that sort of thing. You don't even need huge servers. You just kind of pay as you go for what you need. Everything is very flexible. And then big data, where everybody knows everything. You may be on that Trace Together app that they have to make sure that the government knows who is where. So if you're in the supermarket at 2 o'clock on Saturday and somebody was sick, then you can get yourself checked. And COVID is the reason we're here right now and not in a classroom. And think about the impact. It's kind of hard to appreciate it because we're in the middle of it right now. But it doesn't take much imagination to see that things are going to be very different, and that a lot of companies are going to be out of business, and a lot of people are going to have to work differently. And I don't think many people even knew what Zoom was 2 or 3 months ago. And now a lot of us are on it almost every day. So things are changing in a huge way. And these are some of the distinctions between the work environment of today and what you can expect tomorrow. And sometimes tomorrow is already today. We're already moving into this area. So as we saw before, you've got the hierarchical traditional structure, which is very regimented, and now we've got a lot more openness and teams, and you're on different teams for different purposes with different people, and you may be playing different roles. It's very tailored and customized. And the role isn't, you're not just wearing one hat. You can do different things in different times. So what are some of the roles of a leader? Well, a leader is also a coach, is also a people developer, a problem solver, decision maker, a role model, a visionary. You can see a lot of different things, not just an engineer or an accountant or a boss. Organizations are structured very differently, a lot more flexibility. We hear the word agility a lot. 5 years ago, I don't think anybody heard that word in the workplace. And now it's about being nimble, being flexible, being the first one to move when things change. Influence. Used to be the boss had influence, or the expert had influence. Now we've got a very different environment. We've got this word influencers. And an influencer could be somebody who has videos on how to do fingernails or eyebrows or something. Okay, influence can be anywhere. In the old days, even in my time, young people just didn't even conceive of doing anything great. You didn't have billionaires at age 20. You didn't even have millionaires until you were in your 30s or 40s at the earliest. And some of the most influential people in entertainment and music are very young, even teenagers. It's crazy. This didn't happen a couple of decades ago. And in the past, communication was very carefully controlled by the organization. And you weren't even allowed to speak out, but now they can't stop it. Everybody's tweeting, everybody's on social media. You've got so many channels you have to watch out for, you have to be aware of. And this didn't exist even a few years ago. So all of these changes are happening very quickly. And you may have heard of this expression, VUCA. Anybody hear about that? I've heard it a lot the last few years. Volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. It used to be disruption was rare. Business would go on the same course year after year. Very little would happen to change anything. And now things change very quickly. And this COVID virus, I don't think too many people were ready for this. Is somebody waiting to say something, or they just unmuted or something? All right, I heard some background noise there. Okay, so what makes a great leader or manager different from an ordinary manager? And there's an analogy that comes from a guy you may have heard of, Marcus Buckingham, who's one of the modern leadership gurus. And he says that most leaders play checkers. So if you imagine a checkerboard, you've got every piece is the same unless it's a king, and they can only move diagonally one space, and the king can do a couple of other things. They can jump over, and but you know, it's pretty two-dimensional. It's pretty clear-cut. So that's a good manager. A good manager can play checkers, but a great manager plays chess. And the chess, you've got so many different roles, so many different qualities, and you have to be able to move them in all sorts of different ways, different patterns. You have to look way, way ahead. It's a lot more complicated, a lot more moving parts than in a game of checkers. So to continue with the metaphor, the knight or the bishop or the rook, they've got certain moves they can make. In the workplace, people have certain qualities. And the manager's real job, and this is something, if you only remember a couple things, this is one thing you might want to remember from this session. You know, the manager's job is not necessarily to be productive or to have the answers or to tell people what to do. The manager's job is to discover talent and qualities and competencies and bring them out of people, to draw out their best in all kinds of different ways. And your resume or CV may not be relevant here. In the article Buckingham wrote, he talks about you know, a pharmacy, something like a Watson's or a Guardian, and you've got employees, and some of them are very good at just keeping the shelves stocked. Everything is orderly, nothing runs out, everything lined up. But they're not very good at dealing with customers. And other people are great with customers, and everybody's happy who talks to them. They solve the problems, but they're not very diligent or neat about keeping the shelves stocked and orderly. And even though you have two people in the same role and their job description is to do both of these things, a good manager will recognize that some people have certain qualities and they can deploy them in a certain way. And it's better for the company if this person just deals with customers all the time. And it's better for this person to be stocking shelves. Maybe he doesn't even like to deal with people. He just likes to be left alone and have some busy work. Now, these are obvious examples, but in the workplace, of course, you're going to get some very fine discriminations where most people may not recognize this quality, but the best managers will. So now let's talk about Google. We mentioned them a little bit earlier as one of the top employers and also one of the best performing companies. So what makes them so special? They did a study. Google is so cutting edge. They thought, you know, we're just going to get rid of all of our managers. We're not going to have any managers in the company. And they actually tried that. I don't think they fired all the managers. They probably just said, you're not a manager anymore. You're just go here, do this. And that lasted about 2 weeks before they realized that this was a mistake. We need managers. So then they started studying the managers, and they did a very formal long-term study to figure out what are our best managers doing differently from the rest. In other words, in terms of the feedback, you've got your 360 feedback, and you can evaluate who the top managers are by, say, quartile. So the top 25% of the managers, compare that to the bottom 25% of the managers. What are the best ones doing differently from the rest? What makes the best managers the best? And these are the things they discovered, these qualities. And we'll spend a little bit of time just going through all 8 of these. And then that'll be pretty much towards the end of the session, and we'll be able to share some ideas and you can ask some questions. So we'll go through all of these. Again, if you want to take a quick screenshot, I'll leave it up for a second so you could do that. Okay, so let's go through these in a little more detail one by one. So and these are in order of ranking. So the #1 quality that Google found was a boss or a manager who was a good coach. And we hear a lot about coaching now. There are coaches all over the place. Business coach, life coach, performance coach. Everybody's a coach. And some have a certificate. You know, it's right there on the wall. It says, I'm a coach. To me, coach is not something you are. It's a set of skills and competencies. It's someone who can draw the best out of people. It's someone who can encourage. It's someone who can advise, ask the right questions. Mostly it's about asking questions rather than telling. So what is a good coach? Well, it's someone who gives specific feedback that's constructive. It's not there to beat you up. It's not there to make people feel bad. And when you go to your performance review, I'm sure you know exactly what to expect. They're going to say something nice, and then they're going to say the part you don't want to hear, all right? And a lot of times they emphasize the negative. And you might think, well, yeah, I know I could have done better, but it's already done. I can't go back and fix it now. Why beat me up and make me feel bad about something that's already over and that I learned from? Why not more focus on the positive and the future, what we can do going forward rather than what I did in the past, and the positive rather than some of the negative and the not so nice things. All right. Needs to be some balance, more positive than negative. And even if this person has so much wrong with him and they did nothing right, you can't just dump it on them all at once. It's got to be manageable. And what about that person who did so much wrong and nothing right? Is that his fault? No, it's the manager's fault, because maybe he hired the wrong person, or he's not using him in the right way, or he hasn't trained them well, or he hasn't set clear expectations. You can't really beat up people who are showing up and putting in effort and trying their best. You need to take more responsibility for that. So be a coach. Don't just be a boss. Don't just be a critic. And the other part, and this is probably the #1 thing you can do differently, is have regular one-to-one meetings with all of the people who report to you. Now, when I run this course, I ask, how many people do you have reporting to you? I ask all the participants that question. And the average is 4. 4 is about the average. Occasionally you have somebody with more than 10. That's pretty rare. So it's not a huge number. So let's say you have 4 people who report to you at work. How hard is it to have regular one-on-one meetings with them? Not where you tell them they're not doing a good job, or you nag them, I need that report, what's taking you so long, but just, hey, let's have coffee, let's talk for a while, just see how things are. If you've got 4 people, that means you can have one of these meetings every week and everybody gets a chance once a month. Would that make a difference in your relationship? I think it would. A lot of people don't do this. Well, I'm too busy. What do you mean you're too busy? You're too busy to talk to your people, to get to know them, to understand them. How else are you going to do your job by understanding what their great qualities are? Because they may not see it. It's hard for people to see themselves when they're looking from the inside out, but when somebody who is observant, who works with them, who knows them, they can usually tell you what you've got or where you're lacking. So that's one thing you can take away from this little session. If you've got people working for you, spend time one-to-one with all of them, and don't make it formal, like 10 o'clock tomorrow, it's your turn, because then it becomes intimidating. Try to keep it informal, casual. Most companies now have meeting spaces. Maybe you'll go back to your little meeting space, your lounge soon. Maybe in the COVID, you have to figure out another way to do it, but it could be just a personal call periodically, just to see how people are coping, especially now because there's so much going on and a lot of people are struggling. It's messing with their sanity. They're going crazy. I can't see my friends. I'm cooped up, and very depressing atmosphere. I was out today by the pool. Everybody knows the pool is closed, but what do? They've got this ribbon that goes all around the whole pool, and it makes it look like a crime scene, like somebody died there. It's very depressing. I mean, it used to be a nice view, but now it's just depressing. So people need the one-to-one now more than ever. And that's one thing. I don't care how busy you think you are, every boss, every good boss can find a little bit of time, even 10 or 15 minutes for an employee. And probably you want to try to meet once a month with each person. And with 4 employees, you could do that. Okay, the second thing that Google found, most people don't like a micromanager, somebody who tells them what to do and watches over them and makes sure they do it their way. They want to just tell me what to do and then leave me alone. And if you train me well, and if I know my stuff, I'll do a good job. Okay, so the reason for that is people are afraid, well, if this guy makes a mistake, then it's my fault and I have to clean it up. I'm not going to let him make a mistake. I'm going to make sure he does it my way. And that's sad if that's how you feel. If you don't really believe in your people, or you don't think they're capable, your job is to make them capable. And if they do make the occasional mistake, don't make a big thing about it. Don't beat them up over it. Just try to take it as a learning experience. And everybody's made mistakes. Every boss has made mistakes. They don't like to admit it, but they have. So give people the assignment, but then give them the resources to do it. Be available if they need you. But don't be hanging over their shoulder. How's it coming? What's going on? Trust them enough to do the job. And sometimes you have to give them a little more than they think they can handle, right? They may think, well, this is too much. I can't do it. But then when they do it, they grow. They realize, wow, I'm really proud of myself. I did a great job. So you want to stretch them. And not just give them easy stuff that isn't going to challenge them. So empowering without micromanaging. The third, and part of that is this yes, but, versus I mean, you've all heard this. You go to your boss with a great idea. Maybe you've got a new product that you're going to launch. So you decide, well, we can get the atrium at Takashimaya and we can have games and booths and this and that. Won't that be a great way to launch the product? And your boss says, yeah, I love it. But as soon as you hear the but, you're kind of depressed, deflated, because you know something bad is coming. Yeah, it's a great idea, but we don't have the budget. Yeah, I love it, but we don't have enough time. All right, so now your idea is gone, and that's sad. You've lost your child almost. What if instead of saying yes, but, you made it a point to only say yes and? In fact, get rid of this yes, but from your vocabulary. Promise yourself never to say it again. Yes, and. So the same scenario, you go to your boss, I've got this great idea for a launch of the product, Takashimaya, the games, the booths, da-da-da. And the boss says, yes, I love it. And if you put a team together and get to work right away, we might be able to do it even though we don't have a lot of time. Or, yeah, great idea, I love it. If you call some of our big clients and get sponsors, we might be able to do it even though we don't have the budget for this. Now notice that you're kind of saying the same thing. There's a budget or a time constraint, but instead of saying yes, but, and then why we can't do it, yes, and I'm giving you the chance to make it happen. No guarantees, no promises, but now the person has the power to do it or not do it. But at least it's a boost and it's encouraging instead of demoralizing. It gives them a chance. So that's the sort of thing they mean when they talk about coaching and giving people stretch assignments and the right kind of feedback. Third thing, again, that word concern. Get to know your people. The one-to-one is a good way to do that. But also, what about the new people? I mean, how do you onboard people? Because it may be a big change for them, whether they're just coming out of school and this is their first job, or they're coming from another organization with a completely different culture, or even if they're coming on internally, but from a different department. Okay, the new people, are they going to feel welcome and part of the team, or are they going to feel like maybe I don't belong here, maybe people don't like me, or maybe I'm an imposter? You may have heard of this thing called imposter syndrome. A lot of times when somebody gets the new job or starts after promotion to a new role, they feel, I can't believe they picked me. I have no idea what to do. I hope they don't find out because then they'll fire me. All right? We've got this feeling that we don't belong, we're not good enough. So be aware of that. That's a very common thing. And make them feel like they're welcome and give them the support they need so that they can make that transition. Because it costs a lot of money to hire the wrong person and then find something to do with them and then go recruit somebody else. In fact, that's the biggest mistake most bosses make, hiring the wrong people. So you have to make the transition easier. You don't want them to leave because they didn't feel welcome. Be productive and results oriented. Now, this is what you usually expect from a manager, and yet it's only number 4. So the way Google does it, it's not so much this is what you're supposed to do, this is how you do it, go do it, or else. It's let's decide as a team how we're going to make it happen. So it isn't just developing people as individuals, it's developing the teams. And a lot of times, if you've got different things going on, how to prioritize them. This is a kind of a funny and sad story. A number of years ago, I was meeting with a company who they did oil exploration. They would map the bottom of the ocean, where to find the oil. And they said, our problem is every year we have a strategy session. We come up with 20 goals for the year. And we never accomplish any of them. I said, well, why don't you focus on the top 3? And then when you get the top 3, you go to 4, and you may not get all 20, but at least you'll have 3 or 4. And they said, this is an actual company saying this. They said, we can't do that. They're all important. I don't know how you can help somebody like that. You need to have priorities. You can't do everything you want, but at least, in fact, Steve Jobs did this. After he started Apple and made it fairly successful, he got fired because they had a new CEO. A lot of times the founder can only take you so far. They brought in a new guy, and Steve Jobs got fired. And then a few years later, they hired him back, and then Apple really became a big thing. So what did Jobs do the second time to make them the biggest company in America by market cap? He set very strict priorities. They had a lot of things they were looking at and wanting to develop. And he said, it's going to be painful. They're all great ideas, but some are better than others. And he streamlined the whole process, got rid of a lot of projects that might have done well, but he focused on a few that were brilliant and revitalized the whole company. So prioritizing, especially with that group, with the team. Communication, one of the big things we listed earlier, not just communicating, but listening. Now, listening is a communication skill. A lot of people don't see it that way. They think communicate means talk, or maybe write, or give a presentation, but it's about listening as well. So I want a boss who listens to me, who I feel comfortable sharing with. Be that boss. And then occasionally have, I don't usually recommend a lot of meetings. I hate meetings, and they're rarely as productive as the people think they will be when they plan the meeting. But occasionally you do need some meetings, some face-to-face time, so people feel like they're part of the team and have a chance to ask questions and share ideas. And when you're in these meetings, as the boss, imagine if you're shooting down ideas. No, that's a stupid idea. That's not going to work. We tried it. It didn't work. Pretty soon, nobody's going to give you any ideas. And you're not that smart to think of everything yourself. You need people bringing you ideas. So you need to be encouraging. People need to feel that they're being listened to, that their ideas are being taken seriously. All right? So set that kind of environment. Supporting career development. In other words, even though you work for me and I'm investing a lot in you, I will be very happy to see you get an opportunity to start your own business or to move on someplace else. And, it's about having a good relationship and caring about people, and not how can I get the most out of this person. Somebody earlier said, love people and not use them. Okay? So you love them by helping them reach their potential and have a better life. If you can't do it, then good luck. I hope you find it elsewhere. All right? And then this earlier statistic about the lack of engagement. And number 7, clear vision and strategy for the team. So who are we? What do we want to be? Where are we going? This is usually the very senior people who do this for the company. But within your team or your department, even if it's just a few people, you can still have a vision for that little piece of the company. Okay, so be clear about that, be thoughtful, and get input from everybody on the team in terms of where they want to be and who they are. Okay, and then finally, now this is hard to believe because Google is a technical company. Technical. And yet, having the technical skills and expertise is the least important of these 8 qualities. I remember when Prime Minister Modi was elected in India, and shortly after the election, he was, I think maybe his first day at work, he was sweeping the sidewalk in front of the building. And a lot of people thought, wow, he shouldn't be doing that. And other people thought, wow, how humble. Nobody is so important that they cannot do the work. And when you get down in the trenches, you know, if there's a crisis or, you know, a lot of times I see, even at the supermarket, you go to the supermarket and the queues are really, really long. And then you see a manager, what is he doing? I mean, open up a register and help people. Your job is to serve. And if you didn't have enough people on staff for that shift, then do what's needed. Don't be so self-important that you can't do what needs to be done. Be part of the team. Don't ask anybody to do anything that you wouldn't do yourself. All right. And in a technical company like Google, there's just so much to know and nobody can know everything. So even though you don't have the expertise, you need to find who does and to at least be aware of what you don't know and what you need to have done. Even in government, you can't be an expert in everything. You have to rely on the expertise, rely on everybody to do their part, and just have an understanding strategically of the big picture and what needs to be done. So those are the 8 things that Google does, and a lot of it is different from most of the companies we work at. So what questions do you guys have? Whether about the things we discussed or about the full one-day course or anything else. If you have a question, you can type in your question now, or if you're very brave, you can unmute yourself and ask it, and I'll answer the questions. And then we've got a couple of other slides about how to sign up for the course and get a special promotion even. All right. Okay, let me see. I've got a question from Danlin. I think that's the first actual question a little while ago. Why must present solution? Thought is to facilitate for the staff to problem solve themselves. I don't recall saying that it's your job to have the solution. The best practice is to try to let them solve it themselves. Now, there may be times when they don't have the answer and they can't solve it. Even then, you still want them to try, unless, you know, there may be a crisis or the stakes may be too high. But for the most part, you want people to figure it out for themselves. And if that's not clear, then just ask or refine the question. CT asks, what if we roll up our sleeves and people get complacent? Well, that's a problem. I think one of the roles of a manager is, we said inspire, but also motivate. There's debate of, can you really motivate people? I think most of the time when you do get down in the trenches and work with people, they like to see that. Unless by complacent, are you saying people just won't do the work, they'll just leave it all to you? I suppose that's a possibility, especially if you've only got 4 people there. Right, this assumes that people want to do the job, that people like their job and want to work. There may be a few people who are happy to show up and spend their time on the clock and get paid and not do anything. But most people, this is a big part of their life. They want it to mean something. They want to feel useful, making contributions. And it's your job to draw that out of them. It could be a question of maybe they don't see how their job makes a difference. There's the old, this is sort of a corny story, maybe you've heard it, but I'll tell it anyway because it does illustrate the point. There was a management consultant studying an organization, and it was a construction company. And he went to the site and he saw these people laying bricks, put the mortar, put the brick on, build a structure. And he asked the first guy, what are you doing? What's your job? And the guy said, I'm a bricklayer. He asked the second guy, what are you doing? I'm building a wall. Now notice it's a little bit more involved than just laying the bricks. He's got an idea of what he's doing. He says, okay, carry on. Went to the third guy. What are you doing? Now this is also a bricklayer, building a wall, but the answer he gave was, I'm building a magnificent cathedral to glorify God. All right, 3 people, same work, 3 very different conceptions of what they're doing. So you want the guy who thinks big and strategically, and that's largely what you instill in them. I mean, if you say, all right, lay those bricks, make sure you get, 600 before the end of the day, that's a very different thing from, all right, let's build the greatest cathedral ever. Deal with a team lead who is not keen to lead. Okay. I had a cousin like that. He worked in a record store. He worked there a long time. They made him a manager. He didn't want to be a manager, so they let him sell records again. Some people don't really want to lead. Maybe it's not their ambition. You need to find somebody who's willing to do what they need to do. Maybe they're not inspired. Maybe they feel that imposter syndrome. Maybe you're just not using them in the right way. And when I say use, I don't mean use, I mean deploy or put them in the right position where they can grow and excel themselves. Some way to communicate visions. Okay, the vision, this is a pitch for my storytelling class. I think at 3 o'clock today, we're doing the preview for the storytelling class. The leader is storyteller. The vision usually comes with the story. That's the best way to express your vision. So if you're not signed up for that, you might call or email Aventis and get signed up for that, because we'll talk more about it there. But since you're asking here, I'll give you the short answer. The short answer is every leader should have a vision of where they want to go, whether it's their team, their department, the whole organization, the country. All right, PM Lee has a vision. Elon Musk and all the CEOs have a vision. They're not all very good at explaining it. You know, some think, well, I'm the only one who needs to know this. They just work for me and they do their job. But that's not how you build a cathedral. So you need to explain the vision, sell it, like Martin Luther King did. And in the storytelling class, we look at his I Have a Dream speech, which you can find online. And that's a great example of how you communicate a vision. But we do talk about it. It's a big part of the storytelling course. How often? Well, I mean, the real answer is often enough. There's no schedule for this. It should be so clear that people are aware of it all the time. You don't always have to tell them all the time. Okay. All right, I see CT's comment, private. How to get people on board with us in the vision, tell a good story. That's really it. There's an art to telling stories that inspire people. And we don't have time to teach the whole storytelling class now, but that's where you'll find the answer. How to be a leader when she doesn't practice. Okay. There's a book and a philosophy we talk about in this course, the High Impact Manager, the concept of a multiplier. And a multiplier is someone who can, as the name suggests, leverage or multiply a whole organization of people who are working towards that vision. An inspiring leader, as opposed to a boss or somebody who just gives orders. That's really just a modern iteration of what they used to call Theory X and Theory Y. If you ever took a management course, you learned about that. Theory X is where they don't trust people and they just make you work, you know, like you're an animal. And the Theory Y is when they inspire you and give you resources and let you do your thing, like they do at Google and Apple and all these other great companies. And in that course, in the full course, I sometimes get the question, well, what if my boss is not a multiplier? The other choice is a diminisher, somebody who sucks the life out of the organization and just demotivates people and nobody wants to work for them. A lot of times people don't realize they're that person. And so I say, maybe you get them a copy of the book, and they're usually smart people. They just don't know it's them. But when they read the book, they might. And it may not be easy for most people to tell them face to face. I'm not going to tell you you have to do that or not. But I think most of them, these demotivating people, they're smart, they just don't realize that they're not that effective. So I would say get them a copy of the book. Or you tell them, hey, you know what, you'd really like this course, you should go. And maybe we can get through to them in the class. Okay, the means of getting the vision across. Again, that's really the story. It's a two-part process. First, you have to have the vision. It's got to be clear. You got to know how it's going to unfold, but without too much detail. I'll give you an example because a couple of people have asked this. And when I first started the storytelling course, I remember the very first time I ran it was the day Barack Obama was sworn in as president about 12 years ago. So that's how long it's been. And so I used an example, a hypothetical example of Barack Obama. And I said, imagine if Obama gives a speech and he says, I've got a vision that in 10 years, we're going to have electric cars or hydrogen cars, clean and green, energy efficient cars, no more petrol burning cars to pollute the environment. That's my dream. Do you think that's a good vision? Do you think that's going to happen? And the answer is no, because it doesn't sound believable. Because you've got all these car companies that have been making internal combustion engine cars, and you've got all these oil companies that want to keep selling oil, and they're very powerful players in the business. You're never going to just have electric cars. It's not realistic. I don't believe that. So that's not a good way of selling a vision. Then I contrasted, what if he does it like this? And he says, in 1960 or 61, I think, President Kennedy shared his vision of sending astronauts to the moon in 10 years. At the time, we didn't have a way to get there. We didn't have the technology, but 9.5 years later, they landed on the moon. So the vision came true. So what if Obama begins by saying, whatever years ago, John Kennedy said, this is my vision, man on the moon, 10 years later, we're on the moon. I also have a vision that in 10 years from now, we're going to have all clean and green, energy efficient cars. We've got them already. We've got the technology. We just need the will to do it. And if you're inspiring, people say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we could do that. We did go to the moon. That was a challenge. We could do this challenge and have the electric cars. And now, because Elon Musk did have that vision, and he's made it happen, it's a foregone conclusion. The genie is out of the bottle. There's no way electric cars are going to disappear, because all of the big companies have seen the writing on the wall. They're all making them. BMW and Mercedes and Toyota and Ford, everybody, not just Tesla, everybody's making electric cars now. And a lot of governments have said by 2030 or whatever, we're going to have 50% or all new cars are going to be electric. I mean, it's happening, and you can't stop it. It's part of the force of history at this point. So, so Musk had a vision, and I mean, he did it privately. He did it the hard way, but he did it well enough so that now everybody in the business has to follow suit. I mean, if you're a car maker and you're saying there's no way I'm ever going to make an electric car, you're going to be out of business real soon. Okay, so that's an example of how you might paint a picture in the mind of your audience, who you're trying to share your vision with. You know, it's got to be clear, it's got to be exciting, but it's also got to be realistic. You know, science fiction is this interesting, but it may not be that believable to a lot of people. So the vision story. Again, the leader storyteller, that's the course where we really jump into that. All right, I see another question. The name of the book is Multipliers. Yeah, just Multipliers. And the author is Liz Wiseman, W-I-S-E-M-A-N. It's in the library. You can get it online. And I read books all the time. It's part of my work. I have to keep up with the subjects that I teach. And Multipliers was one of the best business books I've read in the last 5 years. It's not a really difficult book. It's very powerful. Okay. All right. So I'll keep the chat open in case there are any questions, but let me just share the last couple of slides in case you're interested in the course. Okay, the author, Liz Wiseman, W-I-S-E-M-A-N. But if you type in Multipliers and you're looking for books, it'll come up. Okay, so Aventis, they're the ones that sponsor the course, and they're located at the Concord Hotel in case they reopen soon and you guys want to get a classroom experience. But until then, because they're still limiting size of gatherings, we do it online. And there's a QR code you could scan, and they've got a 20% discount in case you're interested. So there's the details. We've got the full one-day course set for July 7th. And you can call Rena or email her or use the code. So let me just make a quick chat, see if there's any other questions before we close up. All right, any other questions before we wrap up? Okay, thank you all for joining us. And I hope to see you virtually or maybe in the future, face-to-face in this or one of the other courses that we offer. So, all right. Okay, so in that case, I'm just going to wrap it up here and end the meeting. You've got the information. So have a good afternoon.